You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi everybody, and now that you're all self-isolating and driving each other crazy, thanks so much for coming back to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. It's been quite a week, and well, I wasn't too sure that I'd actually be able to put a show together today. If you're hearing this, then I obviously did. To show you how fast things are moving, I recorded my kind of joint main guests this week, as long ago as Monday, the 16th of March. They are Aaron Turner and his dad, BG. Aaron's wife, Tricia, had written to me about her husband's plan to hike the 80 this year with his dad. Both men are pastors, and I thought it would make an interesting tale as they prepared in what looked to be like a mounting storm. Of course, on Tuesday, the day after, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy put out an advisory to all hikers to not go through with either their through hikes or their section hikes. I'd already arranged to have a conversation with my second main guest of the week, Heather Sloan, otherwise known as Brave to the hiking community. Heather is in the public health field as an educator, and I wanted her to come on this show and answer my dumb questions in the hope that a hiker talking about public health may make other hikers take some notice. Heather isn't being prescriptive here, but she will certainly leave you with a clear impression of what exactly is happening out there. Heather will be on after Aaron and BG. Also, we have our woman of a certain age, Kate Stillwell, and Kate and I decided to leave it to the last minute to talk, just in case things were moving quickly. And they were. Finally, of course, it's Ben Montgomery's Grandma Gatewood's walk, with our heroine on her way to Damascus. So let's get started. This may prove to be quite a long show, but I thought it was important to include all the conversations and the story as we hunker down over the next few weeks. Here's Aaron and BG Turner. I'd like to introduce you all to Aaron and BG Turner. Hi guys, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Hi, Mighty Blue.
I'm good, actually. And it was your wife, Aaron, Tricia, who wrote to me and told me of your plan to hike the Appalachian Trail this year. Given the current outbreak, where are you in regard to your preparation for this trail?
Well, we're still preparing and planning to leave April 16th. But Dad and I have talked quite a bit about it. You know, we're hoping that maybe the problem will be maybe not as severe by then. We're waiting and seeing. Our plan still is to go, but we're waiting to see how this thing plays out.
Of course, BG, it's easy for Aaron to say that because he's not in the endangered area, but you, like me, are over 65.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling about going out there?
I'm actually excited about it. I know, the coronavirus is a severe issue, and we don't know yet what it's going to turn into. But I was on the trail Saturday, just 2 days ago, and near Harper's Ferry, and
Sure.
I did about a 5 to 6 mile trek there, and I met 22 other people, and of course where I was at Keys Gap, and you can go either way. And the parking lot was full. There were people waiting for others to come back so they could pull in there. So a lot of people are still out there. And I did meet one family out there, about 4 kids and mom and dad. And they said they were doing social distancing there. So if the supplies, if we can get our supplies, it may actually be an advantage.
Yeah, you know what? I have thought about this quite a bit myself, being of that age as well, and staying indoors is something, or keeping away from people is an important thing. And on the trail, one thing you're going to realize is you can stay away from as many people as you wish, or you can be close to people if you wish.
Right.
And so, you make your choice. I suspect it's probably just as safe out there, if not safer out there, than it is in any city you're going to go to.
Yeah,
I agree.
Well, actually, the people that I met, it was, sort of let them carry whether or not they wanted to stop and chat a little bit or move on. And some seemed to want to keep that distance, which is understandable, and others were
Sure.
willing to stop and talk with us. So, but yeah, I think it's as safe out there as it would be indoors.
Yeah, so totally. I mean, I must admit, though, every aspect of life seems to be slowing down. And in many ways, it may be even safer because maybe people will not be going. I know already a number of people have cancelled the hike, especially for this thing. Now, let's go back to how this started for both of you. Have you been hiking together for most of your life, or is this a bit of a one-off?
We've hiked together for years doing hunting and things like that. But this is the first true long distance hike that we've done together. Now, when we've been on vacation together, we've done a lot of hiking then, maybe 5 miles maximum kind of stuff, but never overnight long distance hiking.
You haven't done a single overnight yet?
I've never hiked and camped overnight before in my life.
You might want to resolve that before you go then.
Our window's closing, but we're going to try to do a shakedown stuff in early April. So,
all right, perfect. And what about you, BG? Is this something that's has it been on your bucket list, or is this something you wanted to do, or are you just going because your son wanted to go and you thought, well, I've got nothing else to do?
Well, I'm retiring at the end of the month, and he had asked me about it last fall, and I gave it some thought. I really didn't make up my mind until about the first of the year to actually do it. But yeah, it's not really been on my bucket list. I grew up just in the shadows of the Appalachian Trail in Jefferson County, West Virginia. Sure. And so I was on that as a preteen all over the place. And then of course, as I got older, and so I just didn't have that dream. Obviously we knew the history of the trail, and the Conservancy headquarters is there in Harpers Ferry, but just really hadn't decided to do it until he brought it to my attention. And fact of the matter was, I wasn't sure I could, I'm healthy, but I wasn't sure I'd want to walk nearly 2,200 miles.
Yeah, what rational person would?
Yeah. Listening to you has helped me.
So how did you're the same age as me, 65 or 66?
I'm 66. Like 66.
Yeah, 66, yeah. It's funny, it's definitely becoming more, not so much an older person's game, but more and more older people are prepared to do it, because I think you're 66 and my 67 isn't my parents' 66 and 67.
It's true.
Now, I think we seem to stay a bit younger, longer. And I can assure you, you will get the physicality, even if you may not have it now. You ask me for breath for the first couple of 100 miles, but don't worry about all that. You'll get there. And as long as you've got the determination to get there, that'll be the thing. Now, I recently read out, as you know, as your listeners to the show, I recently read out Paul Stutzman's book. And I understand that this had a lot of inspiration for you, Aaron.
It did.
Can you expand upon that? What did it mean to you then?
I was on a family vacation in Maine. Typically when we vacation, it's my mom and dad, my brother's family, my sister, and all of our kids. Yeah. So we do it together. We were in Maine. I had been feeling for a while that I needed to take a sabbatical from my church. I've been there about 20 years. Happened to be meandering through a Walmart, came across his book. It kind of jumped off the shelf at me. I then did an audio version of it, and I just resonated with me. He was talking about loss and the pain of transition. Ministry can bring loss and a lot of transition, and it just resonated with me. And I'd always wanted to hike the trail, having lived there at the halfway point as a child, till I was an adult. And it just what he shared made it seem so real and so possible. And it really felt like this season in my life, it was a good time. And of course, I preach. That's what I do. I'm a man of faith, and he speaks a lot about faith. So that even more so resonated with me.
Yeah. And did you appreciate somebody such as me, a man of no faith whatever, reading the book on the trail? Because it's funny. I got asked by a number of people, why are you reading this book? Because it's, you're not a man of faith. And I said, this is not my story. It's somebody else's story. And it was one of my favorite books on the trail, despite but as well as the spiritual side of things. I found it a compelling story. And that's what I think, hopefully, I put across in the show.
It did seem amazing to me that it did resonate with you as it did with me. But it seems interesting. RTK was a man of faith. Trigger was a deep man of faith. And this book, it reached out and spoke to you. And it just seems amazing to me that, those many influences have come into kind of your walk as well.
Yeah.
So it speaks to, people in different ways, and it certainly has to me.
So you just mentioned this being a transition, and you say you're retiring at the end of this month, BG. How do you feel, the two of you, particularly at this time, to be leaving your flock, in the church? I'm not judging you shouldn't. I'm just saying, how do you feel about that when this is a time of transition, certainly for this country? You tell me, BG, what does it feel like to you right now?
Yeah, it's a very difficult experience for me. I've been there with this flock for about 35 years, and
Sure.
the transitions that I've seen have been people growing older and passing on, and then newer ones coming on, and so it's a family, an extended family experience, and so it is very difficult, but it is something that I have contemplated for the last few years, knowing that this time
Sure.
would come. So I don't know. That's a good question regarding the transition in our nation right now and dealing with this crisis over the coronavirus. It's definitely added some more thoughts to it that I'm not sure I fully am able to come to a clear solution to that right now. But they've been aware that I've been planning to do this, and it's not going to be a hard break per se, in that I'm retiring and I'll be gone. I mean, I don't want to interfere with the ongoing movement of the church in the future, but I'll still be around, that I can offer any assistance that the governing board would choose to want me to be a part of.
Sure. And for you, Aaron, you said you needed a sabbatical, and I certainly understand the concept of that. So how does your church take to it? Because, of course, I'm sure you told them before all this coronavirus hit. Have they come back to you and said, come on? Or, I mean, how are they coping with it?
No, they haven't come back and asked me to reassess. But, all this is happening in real time. For instance, the governor of Ohio, where I pastor in Ohio, he just shut down schools for 3 weeks. No public gatherings over 100. All restaurants and businesses of that nature are closed. So my people are still ingesting this. And to be honest with you, it's caused pause for me. It's heart-wrenching, because I'm actually coming back to this church to continue ministering, and I don't want to leave them in a bad place.
Yes.
Or make them vulnerable. So I don't want to say that I'm not going to do this, but it has given me pause, and that's something my dad and I have to talk about. And we've kind of talked about that last night, but I'm still planning on it. We have great leaders, but I don't want to leave them vulnerable if my absence would do that.
Yeah. It struck me this morning when I was preparing the questions and thinking to myself, what are they thinking right now? How is this affecting them in their preparations going forward? And do the two of you both get on pretty well? Because you kind of need to when you go away. And I know you're father and son, but it's not always a given, is it? So are you looking forward to spending all this time together on the trail?
I would say my dad is my best friend, and my brother's my other best friend. So I get along great with him, but we are very much alike, and we're very stubborn, and we're both used to leading.
Oh dear.
So that will be strange. That will be strange.
And I don't think as much as he imagines, because my approach to this is, I am a leader, or have been a leader. I am his father, but still, this was his idea, and I've embraced the idea of hike your own hike. But for me to hike my own hike is to support him in his hike. This is something he's dreamed of doing, and as I've thought more about it, it's great that I can support him, and so he's going to be the leader on this. I'm going to be following.
Yeah, let's see how that works out, actually, because being the father is always going to trump everything else. You'll say that classic line, "I am your father," So, so let's see how that works. You can tell us about how that worked out when you get back, actually. Right. So, how have the two of you been preparing for this adventure? First physically, and then we'll talk about the gear in a minute. So what are you doing to make sure you're fit enough, or are you just going to go on the top of the hill and walk down it?
I've been walking about 7 miles a day with a pack. It weighs right now my weight's about 28 pounds.
All right.
trying to get gear weight down,
Sure.
is a struggle.
Sure.
So that's how I've been preparing. The problem with Ohio for me is it's flat. You don't have any kind of elevation change really at all. So that's been primarily what I've been doing. I did get into some elevation in Southern Ohio last weekend, but that's primarily what I've been doing.
Yeah. What about you, BG? Have you been doing any exercise?
Absolutely, because at my age, that was my greatest concern in the first place. And so, although I'm very active and very healthy, not to this degree. And so I walk between 3 to 8 miles, depending on how much time I have each day. 3 to 8 miles a day. I do have a treadmill that goes from 15% inclines to negative 3. So, and I have a computer program that takes me all over the world. I'm able to walk in Europe or
how cool.
the coast of California, or so I've been around. I've been hiking around the world virtually through this program, and it does give you some of the roll of the land, the ups and downs. So helping some. But anyway, 3 to 8 miles a day with my pack. At first, I didn't have the pack, and I'm at about 20 and a half pounds right now.
Wow.
And that made a difference, but it's helping my legs. And I did about a 6-mile hike from a place here in Jefferson County down to Keys Gap. And we did that. My other son went with me on that trip, and we did it in just over 2 hours. And it was just, and it wasn't a lot of elevation change, but it was a very easy hike. So, but that is a concern. I want to be in better shape. I've just watched other people starting down at Springer, and some of them look like they're in shape. Some looks like they're planning to get in shape as they walk. And I hope to be somewhere in between on that.
I was the latter. I was definitely not in shape when I started. I was stopping every 20 yards. But you know what? You kind of get all that. You're going to burn all these calories. And I know you're a big guy, Aaron, aren't you? You told me you're quite a heavy guy right now. About 300 pounds?
I am. Yep. That's correct.
Yeah, because you will lose weight almost catastrophically. I lost it so fast when I did it. Are you prepared for that, or are you just going to eat tons and tons of food? How are you going to handle this?
Well, I'm going to try to have a target of calorie intake, but obviously I've got to lose mass. So I'm going to try to mitigate that as I go. And I have to have my wife send me clothes probably along the way.
You're going to find that out all the time. I went down from a 42-inch waist down to a 34. And unhappily, I'm back up to a 42 because I just couldn't keep it off at all. So it really was a nightmare. What about your gear? If you've been hiking, if you've been hunting, it isn't the same, obviously. So what have you been looking at for your gear? Have you bought it with both of each other in mind, or have you both got a tent, or have you both got a cooking gear? How have you approached it?
I would say it's kind of a hybrid system. There is individual things. We both have our own tent. We do have the same tent. I went with a Osprey Atmos 65 liter backpack. He's gone with a Z-Packs Arcall. Is that what you got, Dan? I think
Arcall. Yes.
So I like his backpack a lot better than mine, I think. But we're going to share cooking system to try to take down weight, trying to pull resources any way that we can with water, filtration, things like that, trying to lessen our weight as much as we can, but also taking the things we need for each other, individually.
Right. And what about things like sleeping bags and all that sort of thing? Are you preparing for as you're starting in April, it should be quite a bit warmer, obviously, hopefully, than it was before. But I got snow in April, just so you know. So how are you planning for some of the cold weather that will probably still be there?
I'm planning on cold weather through the Smokies. Right. So I'm taking a 15-degree bag. Right. I have a liner. Going to be taking some base layer, very light base layer with me, but kind of approaching it like we could get snow and we have cold weather. Yeah. So that's kind of our approach. Once we get through the Smokies or maybe to Damascus, we'll reassess.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You know what? One of the things I will say to the two of you is that your hike will be a constant reassessment. Where you are and how you're feeling each time you'll change your mind a lot, and you'll enjoy doing that, I'm sure. And particularly in terms of this coronavirus thing. So how have you thought about resupply? Are you going to go into town, or you get boxes sent to you? Because some of these places, when you get there, may or may not be open.
Well, we were just talking about that this morning. We're probably going to have to rely on boxes because what I'm reading on the Thru Hiker 2020 page from people that are already hiking is they're starting to run into resupply issues in town.
All right.
So, and we were really wanting to do resupply in town. So we're really going to have to change our plan to address that. But then also there's resupply issues here.
Yeah.
I went into the grocery store here yesterday and there were things wiped out and you don't know about the supply chain. We're hoping it's strong, but we're going to have to rely on boxes. I really feel, I believe. I don't know how you feel, Dad.
Yeah. I mean, as Aaron said, we were hoping to do a good bit of the resupply in the local towns and so forth. And I'm not so sure they may not be better equipped because from what I'm reading, they're not highly populated. I mean, I know
That's
that
true.
the trail traffic is going to increase that some, but we were talking about fuel this morning, that a lot of the fuel has gone from Walmart, but yet some of the smaller retail stores along the way are saying, hey, we still have it.
Yeah.
Of course, if they run out, then we may have a problem. But I'm hoping and praying that this crisis will not be an extended crisis, but it's going to be a wait and see on that, I guess.
And your journey this year, in many ways, guys, is a bit of an experiment. This is not going to be like other people's hikes. So what you expected it to be already isn't going to be that way. But we extemporize, don't we? We make things up as we go along. We find out the result of what we need, and we go and do it. And it's your ability to adapt, which is going to be really important. And when you're out there, firstly, I was going to ask you, which I haven't written down as a question, but have you got trail names yet?
My trail name is Hopeful. And that comes from a book that John Bunyan wrote called Pilgrim's Progress. And the book is about a trail.
Of course, yeah.
And one of the characters, he kind of lost his way and he found it again on that trail. And so I'm hoping to find a lot of things on the trail. So I'm very hopeful.
Without prying too much, are you trying to find your faith again, or try to strengthen your faith, or trying to find something else about you and revitalize you on the trail then, Aaron?
Not really looking for myself or even faith. When you serve as a minister to people, you give a lot of yourself, and in doing that, your walk with God can largely be reduced down to what you're giving other people.
Right.
And in this walk, I just want to focus on my personal walk with God, and and finding my own way with him again. Not that I've lost it, but just to refine that and to grow in that. So that's I'm very hopeful about that.
Cool. Yeah. So what's your name going to be then, BG?
I haven't decided yet. It's been the most difficult part of this entire preparation, and I've just not settled on a name yet. So I'm still working on that. There
is danger, of course, in allowing people to name you.
I've thought of that as well. I hope to have it before we start for sure. So,
and when you guys are out there, you're actually going as two guys. You're not going as two pastors. You're going as two guys, aren't you? So, yes. But people will know you're pastors. They're going to find it. Either they listen to the show. You'll be surprised how many people do hear the show, but they might know it anyway, or they'll ask you. You'll be sitting around talking to people, hopefully keeping social distance and all that sort of thing at the shelters. Do you see the opportunity or the option of talking to people about God, or is that not already part of your plan?
Well, it's for a minister to turn that off is very hard. I'm not going to proactively, force people to talk. I serve as a chaplain for a local company, Gordon Food Service. And when I go through in my walkthroughs every week, my goal is just to be their friend. And we'll talk about sports. We'll talk about cars. We'll talk about,
right.
And if in that they decide they want to talk about something spiritual, then we will. And that's going to be kind of my approach. I'm not going to broadcast what I do. I'm sure it'll come up.
Sure.
But if somebody says, hey, can I pick your brain? Sure. I would do all that I could to speak to that or to help if that would be helpful.
I'm sure. And actually, What are you looking forward to, BG? What are you looking forward to on this trail? Are you looking to share, just sharing the time with Aaron, or you just want to enjoy? Now you've got the idea that you're going. Are you looking to enjoy the views and the experience?
Oh, absolutely. I First of all, with Aaron, we've been apart. When he first came back from school, he worked with me in our church for a couple of years, I guess,
Sure.
maybe 3 years, until he moved away. And so, in the last 20 years, we've lived, approximately 400 miles apart, and so my grandkids have grown up without us, and I mean, we still connect with vacations. We connect every major holiday. We try to spend time together, which I
Right.
appreciate Aaron's effort to do that. Usually they come home, so just to spend that time with him. I'm very close to his older brother, who lives here in our area. So and with his younger sister, we're really a family oriented people.
Cool.
So just to be able to spend to make up for the last 20 years is really exciting. And we're going to invite, my daughter and my other son, and any other family members to join us as often as they can in this adventure. So yeah, that to me, that's number one. There's no doubt. But just being an outdoorsman, growing up on the Blue Ridge, just in the shadows of the AT.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It's a part of my life, and just being out there this past weekend, I told my other son, this is like heaven to me. Just being here, enjoying the views, enjoying the woods. So yeah, I am very much looking forward to that. I've had the blessing of traveling. I've been able to travel pretty much around the world in missions endeavors through the years, and also in all the states, including Alaska and Hawaii. I've been so I just love the natural beauty of the world and of our nation, but the AT certainly doesn't come behind in any of that. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. And I'm constantly dealing with people, which that's a part of ministry. I'm not saying that in any way to be critical, but just to be able to relate more to trees and rocks and water. That's a little bit exciting too. Hopefully that doesn't sound cynical at all. I don't mean it to be.
Not at all. No, I entirely understand the sentiment. Not a problem at all. And you, Aaron, you've read more about the AT, I presume, than your dad, and so you'll know what the place
Sure.
is to look forward to. Are there any particular spots you're really excited about?
Katahdin. Certainly the end would be
Yeah.
something we're looking forward to.
You don't want to think about that for the first 4 months.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm looking forward to making it to Neil Gap. I'm looking forward to the North Carolina-Georgia line. Every ridge walk. McAfee's Knob. I really, really, really want to see that, and Dragon Tooth and Max Patch. I saw some pictures the other night from a man that was staying on top of Max Patch. I think Wild on the Trail is who it was. And man, it was gorgeous. And so those places along the way, I cannot wait to see with my own eyes. So yes, very much looking forward to that. And to do it with my father is going to be outstanding.
And one thing I was thinking about this morning when I was, preparing these questions, and once again, I didn't write it down, but I was just thinking about it. If one of you, God forbid, got injured and had to leave the trial because of an injury, just a knee or something like that, would the other one go home, or have you already talked about that? Because I think you need to have a plan in place when, the odds are against both of you. The 1 in 4 for both of you, or 1 in 5 for both of you completing it. So one of you may well not do it. The odds are worse for the two of you completing it. Have you considered what you might do if you can't both go together?
We haven't discussed that, but
I would if I were you.
You're absolutely right. We need to discuss it. Mm-hmm. It's like the one thing you don't want to talk about, but we will have to talk about that. And I would hope that if something happened to myself, my dad would go on, and if I could get better and get back on trail with him, that I would. I think I haven't talked to him again. I assume he would probably feel the same about me. Just knowing each other, we want to see the other succeed, and what we can do to help the other. So I imagine that'll probably be the solution we come up with.
You'll actually find that the other hikers will feel. It's one of the very few endeavors in life I've ever seen where everybody who's on the trail is as vested in your success as their own. It's amazing. You'll be shocked at that. Now, however, people may give hikers a bad name, the way in which they all want you to succeed will be breathtaking for you. And I'll leave it at that. But tell me that I'm wrong when you come back, because they will want you to succeed. I guarantee that. Now, what would you deem to be a success? Is Katahdin the only version of success, or will a 1,000-mile hike do it?
Could I speak to that? I think Aaron thinks, like he said, a lot like me. Really, that's the ultimate success, and anything less is not failure, but it's not achieving the goal. It was interesting to listen to RTK as you
Sure.
spoke with him even before he left, and that seemed to be really his concern. He wanted to be able to make it, and with the exception of injury or something like that, and that's the way I think we're approaching it as well. And that's why I agree with what Aaron said earlier. If I wasn't able to continue, I would certainly want him to continue, and I would do my best to pick up with him, as soon as I could, if I was able to do that. I spoke to a hiker Saturday who had hiked over 900 miles of it. He started from Maine and came southbound several years ago. He's made it 900 miles, but as I shared with him my plans in the near future, there was a twinkle in his eye, and I could tell he really regretted, and it's been like 20 years for him, that he had not finished. And just speaking with me, my son said, I think if you were to invite him, he would go with you. He just wanted to get back out there on the trail. So it seems to be something that's catching, that you want to finish as much of it as you can, or the entire trail if possible. Yeah. So that really is important to me, and I know it is.
I'm sure it is. And what will you do with your adventure? Let's assume you both get there. Fantastic. You both stand on top of Katahdin. What are you going to do with it? Because it's an inspirational thing. You'll be surprised how you can inspire people. What do you think you're actually going to do with it? Particularly you, Aaron, taking it back to your church, I guess.
I speak at a lot of youth camps in addition to my church. And so I'll use it as an illustration to try to just inspire people, I think, to do impossible things. I think that humanity is far more capable of accomplishing things than often we give ourselves credit for. Now, of course, my feelings are God enabling us, of course, to do that.
Sure.
But at a time like this, when grocery stores are being wiped out and people are becoming suspicious of each other, man, it'd be awesome to have a message of rising above those things, overcoming obstacles, overcoming viruses, and really achieving things that people said was never possible. I just want to inspire people to do things that they said they couldn't do, is what I'd like to do with this.
Well, as you know, as you listen to the show regularly, I normally introduce people on here who have hiked the AT or the PCT or various long distance trails. Rarely the main guest is somebody who hasn't done it yet. So I'd love you to stay in touch with me if you could on this, because, I love the fact that you're still thinking of going out there. You still want to go out there. And I just think you are safer out there in many ways than you would be in a town. So, sure. I just hope you get what you want out of this trip, and you will come back to me regularly, and we'll have a little snippet with each other, 5 minutes every now and then, just telling people how you're doing, and just keep in touch with me. Okay.
We would love to do that.
Absolutely.
That's super. Well, thanks for being on, guys. And I just hope you're as excited as I am, because I'm excited for you. And I love the fact that people are still going out there. So have a great time. Okay.
Yeah, we are excited.
As a bit of an update to Aaron and BG, I spoke with Aaron on Wednesday afternoon, and he and his dad were still planning to hike, though they said that they'd constantly be reviewing that decision as the time to leave draws near. And I think it was the availability of food on the trail that was really worrying them more than anything else. Now, with everything coronavirus uppermost in our minds, here is Heather Sloan, or Brave, with a rare insight to this issue that may well help hikers make sensible decisions. Here's Heather. I'd like to introduce you to somebody who may be able to give us, or perhaps actually more me, a little bit more clarity than most of us currently have. This is Heather Sloan, or Brave, as she is known on the trail. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Hey, Mighty Blue. I am doing good considering the craziness going on in life right now for all of us.
Yes, there is a lot.
How about you?
Well, I'm good right now. Having I'm now currently really self-distancing or self-isolating, whatever you call it these days, because I'm in the generation. I'm a 67-year-old man, so I'm the one. If anyone's going to get it, it's going to be me.
Oh no, you're so healthy. You'll do great.
But we're talking, and it's quite important for me to do this, to be talking on the afternoon of Wednesday, March the 18th, which means I'll be editing right into the evening because the show comes out overnight. And with such a fluid situation right now, I thought it was really important to set the context for this. And the ATC yesterday advised hikers to abandon their plans to through and to section hike the Appalachian Trail. And they actually said, the salient words are, "We urge you to return home until these risks have passed." First, can you let everybody know your bona fides to be speaking publicly about this?
Sure. So I have a degree in public health with a concentration in education. And basically that just means that, I'm kind of set up to where I've had to study a lot of this infectious diseases, microbiology, a little bit of everything there, but also be able to take it kind of out to the public. Right.
And you being a hiker as well, that's obviously, a lot of your attention is turned towards hiking. And when we spoke about this yesterday, I mean, I took a lot of notes, but something you told me really struck me. And I think it's been missed in nearly all conversations about this virus. You told me that the effect of a long-distance hike on a hiker's immune system could be somewhat compromised. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. So, yes, I am a long-distance section hiker, or a lasher, if you will, as we tend to like to call it. I was actually hoping to do my through hike this year. But so one of the things, I've been doing research on hikers, and yes, I take a lot of my public health education to the trail because I love backpacking and I love the Appalachian Trail community so much. Sure. So it's really important for me to kind of combine those two loves and kind of give back to my community in that way, since that's kind of my special power, if you will. And so
I haven't found mine. I haven't found mine yet, by the way. my special power has still been hidden all my life.
You're doing yours. You're great. No, I love it. It's fantastic. So what I'm doing is finding that a lot of these hikers each year, so I've been doing this research since 2013, I've noticed they have compromised immune systems. And what I did is went back and did some research, and I actually found some concrete information on why that is. And it's basically boils down to what's called overtraining syndrome. And it just more or less means that when you're out there working your body and you're hiking 15 to 20 miles on average every day for 4 to 6 months, or even for a lasher, depending on how long you're out, that puts a lot of wear and tear on your body. Yeah. So, what I've noticed is a lot of hikers end up with this compromised immune system. So something that somebody in town might be exposed to, let's say even something as simple as poison ivy, might not get as bad when you're in town, but then when you're on the trail, because you have a weakened immune system and you've been out there hiking, you might have it blow up into a full-blown, antibiotic needing infection. Wow. So that's a big concern with coronavirus for sure this year.
So the corollary of that then is that these young hikers, and there's also lots of older hikers as well, such as myself, hikers generally are more exposed than you would otherwise think they would be. Is that correct?
Yeah, more exposed in the way, I guess, I just want to say they're more vulnerable. More vulnerable. It's the right word. Yep. Yeah. So not exposed in the way of like their environment. Their environment's great, like you can kind of get away from quite a bit. But what you'll notice, this is part of the reason why norovirus blows up so bad on the AT, is that it only takes one person to encounter it when they're in a trail town or resupplying, or, maybe they went out before they got on trail and picked it up. It just really depends. But once you have one hiker and then it's exposed to so many other hikers, that's why they tend to pick it up a lot faster and much quicker.
Wow. Now, and I know that many people have been dismissing the urgency of this crisis. But fortunately, the federal government is at last starting to work more coherently, and many people cited the regular flu as a comparison, saying that thousands die each year and we don't take these precautions. Can you give some sort of side-by-side comparison between the two viruses and how they act on people?
Yeah, absolutely. So the flu, we well know, our bodies are used to the flu, and we've at least all had some exposure somewhere. So the body's immune system recognizes a flu strain, even though some of us will get really sick, and it still has, hundreds of thousands of people that are sick every year, depending, across the world, globally, millions. But with coronavirus, when you kind of compare the two, the flu has a 0.1% death rate. So, and we all know that the flu death rate is just, that's a lot. That's a lot just in an average year, and especially for those that are compromised. But then when you compare it to coronavirus, which has a 3.4% death rate, that's what the World Health Organization has updated it to. That's a big difference, and that can equate to a much more severe illness. So something maybe not to take quite as lightly as the flu. We also have vaccines, so we have some herd immunity for the flu, where coronavirus, this particular strain, I want to make sure I emphasize that, COVID-19, which is the disease that it causes, or SARS-CoV-2, actually is very different, and we've never been exposed to it. So we have no immunity at all, which makes us much more susceptible.
And also, isn't the transmission more aggressive in the coronavirus, or the COVID, whatever you call it, COVID-19? Is that, more, as I understand, it's more aggressive and easier, the transmission, than the transmission between people with the flu?
That's absolutely right. So we call it the R naught, and what it does is it's basically the rate of reproduction. So it just means that if one person has the flu, then maybe 1 to 2 more people will get the flu from that particular person. With COVID-19 coronavirus that we're talking about readily here is somewhere between, they've kind of changed it a little bit, but the R naught for that is between typically 2 to 3, sometimes as many as 5. And sometimes, of course, you'll see a little bit more spreading. It just depends on the situation and where the person is that's sick. So it just has a lot to do with also environmental factors. So, if the person's sick and they're going out and about and touching everything and around a lot more people, that you might see that rate of transmission go up. So yes, that definitely makes it, something to take more seriously. Also, the flu doesn't last as long. So people typically that have the flu, they're sick for maybe up to 2 weeks. Right now, what we're seeing with coronavirus is that some people that do really well with it might be sick for 2 weeks, but then those that are struggling with it, they could be sick for up to 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Something to look forward to.
Crazy. Yeah, I hate to always, the only bad thing with this, with being a public health educator, I'm always the one bearing the bad news.
Well,
I don't like that part.
We're going to continue on the theme of bad news for a second, because as a member of, being within the public health system, can you give some idea, or have some idea, of how quickly this is starting to threaten the actual infrastructure of the healthcare system in the US? Because while this is happening, there's other illnesses and things happening. So I'm sure that our healthcare system probably operates at pretty high, up towards capacity anyway, doesn't it? So is it really impacting the healthcare system right now?
It is in areas. So just like so what you're seeing, is that we're having these larger outbreaks in certain areas. We call them kind of the hot zones. So like, for example, in and around Kirkland, Washington, and then New Rochelle, New York, we're also seeing a lot of cases there. Florida, you're really seeing them start to pop up everywhere, Colorado. And so what happens is that you will start to notice the hospitals in those particular areas suffer first, because, of course, you have more cases, so then you're going to have a higher need. Where we're seeing that is in the lack of what we call proper protective equipment. And then ICUs, we'll see that they'll start using full capacity of ICUs, and that'll be a problem when we start to run out of space there. Right now, it seems like the biggest concern really is having the proper equipment and ventilators, which we just don't have enough of. And as you probably have noticed, most of the world does not have enough. So we really are in a crisis there with trying to get more production online.
Yeah, no, I know. And the reason I wanted to reach out to you in the first place, you posted a warning on Facebook just a few days ago, but then you posted later. And this shocked me, saying that you've got a whole lot of online hate. And listeners to my show know how much I loathe Facebook for that particular thing. Do you think it's an indication that people are still resistant to the idea that this actually is a pandemic and something we should be taking seriously?
I do. I think, it's so confusing because the media just isn't on the same page. So I think it just causes a lot of confusion. And of course, it's really difficult to kind of, even just for public health professionals, to kind of wrap our heads around like, wow, these things we may have studied and worked on and have seen to a smaller degree before. This is really a big problem. This is something to take very seriously. We haven't seen something like this since the Spanish flu of 1918. We're kind of concerned about that. We're concerned if this could be something similar to that. And you'll see that, the WHO talks about that quite a bit, as well as the CDC.
Yeah, and I saw a picture of a bunch of youngsters on the beach I think it was Miami, on South Beach, all getting together. So the importance of younger people paying attention to this, and the fact that though they may not suffer badly themselves if they get it, they may very well pass it on to their parents and grandparents. That is an issue, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So, we do strive to get everyone to start practicing some social distancing, especially in areas like that where you have so many people coming together. So it just really increases that risk of all the locality there, so the communities around those areas where you have all those young people, plus when they go back home, but I do want to stress that this is something that everyone has to participate in if we're going to really fight this the way we need to, and that everyone is at risk. Yes, however, of course, people with underlying conditions and people that are typically, you'll see that death rate go up from 40 years old and up. So I don't want people to think that it's just only the people over 60. That's not really the case either.
Right.
It's just, of course, as it goes up further and further, we do see an increase in that death rate. So it certainly is more riskier for the older populations, but I don't want to mislead the younger people either. If they have asthma, if they have, diabetes, obesity, all of these things can factor into how their body may respond to this virus. Jeez.
Now, intuitively, it seems to me that, forests or mountains would be a pretty good place to be this year because, especially, if you're worried about socially distancing yourself, you could quite successfully do that on the trail, particularly now as many people are heeding the ATC advice and abandoning their plans. Wouldn't that environment still be safer than any town?
I wish I was out there. I wish there was a way to be out there, not have to come back to town. So for all those off-grid people that have already figured all that out, kudos to them.
Yes.
But as far as the trail goes, yes, the trail itself, if you don't have the large numbers, I think that was one of my big concerns. It was, if you have the typical big numbers, 2,000, 3,000 people getting on the Appalachian Trail, heading northbound between a month and a half to 2 months time period, that's not an ideal situation you want to be in. So in that case, that's not probably the safest place to be. However, again, it just boils down to the numbers. And then what do you do when you get to a town? When you get to a town, you have to resupply. So my big concern there is what will happen to the supply line and the supply chain? How will those small towns be affected? Yeah. And then, what if you were to pick up the virus and then go back out to the trail? What if you're really ill and quite far away? Now, of course, on the AT, that's not as, quite, I want to say maybe not as dangerous in the way that at least you've got road crossings coming up quite often versus maybe a PCT or a CDT hike. That would be a very different situation.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be closures of businesses on the trail, and also I think I've discussed this with somebody else this week about trying to get hitching a lift. I suspect that will be out of there's no possibility of anybody stopping for somebody at the moment, is there? So you have to walk into town, and all those things really are just so worried about it. Now, you mentioned earlier on about getting immunity, and a theory I heard yesterday, so it may be a crackpot theory, I don't know, was that getting the virus now may be preferable than later, as you'll probably get over it and hospitals aren't overwhelmed yet. But beyond that, you'll have a bunch of immune people, and that's what you were talking about, the herding immunity or something like that. Yeah, does that sound valid or not?
this is one that I can't really advise on. So there's some differing information. We really just have to kind of wait and see. Typically we do have immunity. We have immunity after we're exposed to something. And I'm not saying that we are not going to with this particular virus, but I will say that there has been some cases of where they're saying, and we're just not sure. I'm waiting for the World Health Organization to look into this more before I really speak too much of it. But there's been some interesting cases where they are saying there's been some resurgence. I don't know that I per se believe that. Typically, yes, when you're exposed to something, your body does develop a recognition of it.
Sure.
The concern, of course, is that, we don't want too many people to get sick at one time, like we're seeing in Washington or New York City. So we really don't know how many people are sick right now. We are expecting these numbers to grow pretty rapidly. They say that every 3 days, this virus will probably double. So, I think right now the best thing to do is try to keep yourself healthy and avoid it, because there's probably a lot of people out there already that have it that don't know they have it.
Yeah, and you mentioned already that you had plans to do your own through hike in 2020, but you've decided not to go, and you know this stuff better than most of us. Any regrets about that choice, or do you think still it was the right choice not to go?
Oh, I'm deeply saddened about not being on the trail, and I so miss everyone. I miss the mountains, looking at pictures and talking to trail friends. Do I regret it? No, I know it was the right choice. I'm glad that I'm here, and I do feel like I can at least put myself to work in other ways to be able to help, not only the Appalachian Trail community, but my local community at large as well.
I'm sure. But at the end of the day, the trail is still going to be there. And so when this is over, you're still going to get another chance, which leads me to say, please, if you do go on it next year, come on the show again and tell me about your hike, because we've already got over this by then, and you can tell us about your story on the trail.
That sounds great. I absolutely will. And just remember, everybody, to, keep doing what you do. And if people come together like they do on the AT community, I think we'll all get through this just fine. We just have to hunker down and kind of just take it easy for a little while.
Yeah, you're right. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Heather. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we will speak again about your hike next year. But if things develop in the next month or so, perhaps you'd come on again and see if there are any new developments, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Mighty Blue. It was great talking to you.
And you. Bye.
Bye.
I don't know about you, but I thought she was terrific. She was clear in her thinking and really seemed to know her stuff. The fact that she has decided to postpone her 2020 through hike definitely told me something, given that I know I'd have been devastated to have had to postpone mine last year. As I said to her, I'd love to have her back on the show as a successful and healthy through hiker in 2021. And of course, I wanted to hear from Kate to find out what she was thinking with her own journey just 2 weeks away. Let's hear from her. Here's Kate. Well, we are back on with Kate. Firstly, hi, Kate. How are you?
As well as can be expected.
Exactly. And this may be a very brief conversation. And I truly have no idea what you've decided to do, because as you probably know, the ATC gave out advice yesterday for everybody to abandon their through hike and section hiking plans for this year. Have you decided what to do, and are you still going?
Well, my departure date was April 1, so that's literally 2 weeks from today.
Sure.
It seems that by then we should have clarity as to whether that curve is flattening or whether we're going to surpass China and Italy in our ramping vertically. So I think that that's really more so in the next week. It'll be self-evident. But at the very least, I'm pretty sure that it has to be postponed.
Yeah.
I haven't canceled it outright. I do have a ticket to go to Maine in mid-June.
All right. Good luck with that.
So yeah, as long as the planes are still flying. So that, I'm very open to changing the direction that I was going to go. First off, if by any miracle I could go south, because mine was originally a SOBO wraparound,
sure,
I would not go south. I would go north. because
really?
I would say, yeah, I would want to stay ahead of any bubble, and I would just go north and finish in Katahdin, then come here and go south.
How would you feel, Kate, being so by yourself? Will you be okay with that?
Yeah, the only issues resupply. I think that if you decide to live in a tent and basically have access to food, although that at this point goes completely contrary to what the CDC and the AT are recommending. So putting it off is fine. I think everybody, well, I'm going to do that, but it doesn't mean that going on the trail at some point this year is still a possibility, and not having company isn't a consideration for me. I mean, I love the trail community, but there's just a draw that I have that I would like to get out in the woods and do this hike.
It's funny, Kate, for me, and I've thought about this a lot over the last couple of days as well, because things are changing so dramatically, aren't they? I think we're all learning. I mean, I think I already knew it, but a lot of people are still learning the concept of exponentiality. Everything is growing exponentially, and what that means. And I saw the numbers this morning that even though the numbers are still not large, the number of confirmed cases have quintupled since last Friday. It's only Wednesday now.
Yep.
And the number of deaths have also gone up about threefold, I think it is, in those 5 days. And now, while the numbers are low, if that continues to go, and our president was only saying the other day that this could still be rising and increasing till July, or till it peaks in July. Well, I'm pretty smart enough to know what that means in terms of the numbers. That's huge. And there was another study that came out in Europe yesterday, that predicts 500,000 deaths in the UK, and that's on 60 million people in the country. I mean, that is just staggering numbers. And
2.2 million in the US.
Yeah, I thought about not saying that, but yes, you're right. I heard that as well. I suspect it won't be like that, but you just don't know. And because we don't know, being as careful as we can, this is the time to be staying indoors. And you never know, this next 14, 15 days could really help, or it could just get worse. It may already be here. So, right. And it's interesting to me because I still, despite all this advice, don't you think that being out in the woods, you're probably going to be away from more people out there than you are if you just hang out in any town anywhere in the country?
Well, there's validity to that. And certainly it's one of the considerations. I mean, I took a 8-mile hike in a public park that's not far from my house with my dog.
Yeah.
And I have never seen more people in that park before. And while most of them had dogs, there were family units. But what struck me as mind-boggling was the prevalence in the dog section where you can let your dogs run loose. Uh-huh. There were over 35 dogs in the large dog enclosure with at least 60 people in there, all within close contact of each other because they were catching their dogs. And I was looking at this going, these people are they think, what are they thinking? They're home because their businesses have shut, their schools have shut, they're supposed to be practicing safe distancing, social distancing, and yet here they are being completely oblivious to the knee-jerk reaction of being social with their dogs. Head slapping. What can I say?
So tell us about, if you do decide to go, and I love the fact that you're still considering it, but I suspect you now know that this won't happen for at least 2 or 3 months, will it? You may end up going quite a bit later, 3 or 4 months' time, if things do ease off a little bit.
Right. Right.
Have you considered what it's like? You must have thought about it, but you were 2 women before, you and your daughter. Now you're just a woman going by herself. How does that play into your thought process?
Well, it's a little bit early. I don't think that it changes it much. I do think that there might be a group of people when it's deemed relatively safe or safe to hit the trail that might hit the trail and create tramways at arm's length. I think it's just premature to again, the whole solo bit means being prepared to be solo,
Yes.
which means alone.
Yeah.
And for me, again, it's the resupply that has me the most concerned, even though, the supermarkets
Sure.
are expected to remain open, but that's assuming you can get supplies as, people are hit with a virus, truck drivers and delivery personnel and so on and so forth. I mean, my son is still working every day. He's expected to show up to work every day.
So why do you, how do you plan to do this? So if you do start going, if you do go rather, are you going to get more resupplied from home than you were otherwise, or are you going to try to get most of your stuff in town?
Well, if in looking at the AT guide, now I have the southbound version, but so, from Harper's Ferry north, you just kind of flip it. I was doing the calculations, how many days of food one would have to carry in order to be able to resupply in towns that are either on or really close to the AT.
Sure.
And rather than, certain towns are 4 miles, well, obviously you're not going to successfully hitchhike, or at least you can't count on it.
No.
So basically those that are a mile or half a mile from or off the trail, of which there are several, that's where one would resupply. So you're carrying more food and therefore more weight.
Yes.
So that has to be as part of the calculation. Even if everything goes away and everything's safe, it's probably going to take a little bit of time for, stores to get back on an even keel, for the food that they have on shelves and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, I'm loath to talk about preparations that we just don't know. I think we're going to have a lot more clarity within the next 2 weeks, don't you?
Yeah.
And it may
absolutely.
It may well be that when we catch up next week, this decision will almost have been taken away from you. But it may well be that we've suddenly find something's happening that we hope, we don't think is happening at the moment. But I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on this, but it strikes me. I don't know if that's an American expression or just an English one, actually, a Debbie Downer. I don't want to be down on this, but
it's a familiar one.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a familiar one.
It just strikes me. This is a tricky time to be even talking about what you might be doing going forward.
Well, you have to plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you remember how prophetic it kind of was when we were talking last week, and I said that I think this was off air, that to me it was less luck, good luck, than the absence of bad luck.
Yes,
and
you did.
Boy, have we just been given a load of bad luck, and I'm not using expletives to bring that point home. Yeah. Wow.
Well, let's hope you get some good luck. The trail does often provide, and I suspect at the moment it's not providing for many people right now. Although, funnily enough, on Facebook today, I have seen a couple of people reaffirming that they're staying on the trail. So hopefully they're going to be safe and they stay safe. And they're, I'm going to be looking at following their posts to see how it develops. And I am particularly worried about the resupply. I think that's going to be the big issue there. And I think that's, right. I don't think hikers are going to be welcomed into towns. That's another thing, to be honest with you. Outsiders coming in. So, we'll just have to see. But look, I'll tell you what we'll do, Kate. We'll catch up again next week, but we'll stay in touch in the interim anyway to see how things develop, okay?
You bet. Stay smiling, stay strong. And I guess we will do as the Queen says, we will carry on.
Yes, absolutely. All right.
All right.
Cheers then. Bye.
Okay, bye.
So that wasn't a definitive no, but she's being realistic as far as I can see. I'm sure we're all going to learn so much more about this and its impact in the coming weeks. All I can say to you, with Grandma Gatewood about to hit Damascus, is stay as safe as you can. We are all in this together, and even though you may not be personally afflicted, your body could well pass it on to somebody you love. In fact, that is an absolute certainty in an America that doesn't currently seem to take this as seriously as our scientists obviously do. Stay safe out there. I'll see you next week. Chapter 4, Wild Dogs. June the 1st to the 8th, 1955. She'd been gone nearly a month. Emma's children hadn't heard from her, had no idea where she was or what she was doing, but not one of them was worried. Their mama was raw-boned and sturdy, and despite her absence, they knew she'd be all right, whatever her ambitions. It wasn't rare for her to be gone for long stretches, so if they gave her disappearance a passing thought, it did not dwell in their memories. She zigzagged between North Carolina and Tennessee, thirsty, sore, tired, over roads of cut stone and up mountainsides steep and tall, sleeping outdoors more often than in, giving herself to the wilderness, planting a crop of memories, exploring the world and her own mind, writing in a little notebook of the challenges and rewards, the wild dogs that came in the night, the cosy fire that made a campsite more cheerful, the magic of campers who shared their sausage sandwiches across picnic tables. "My feet are sore," she would write. "I did not find any water," she would write. "I kept a fire for company as well as protection," she would write. "When I could not locate the trail after an hour, I was so near out of food," she would write. Occasionally, when she'd slip off the path, the woman who wouldn't let a passing tramp go hungry back home in Ohio now gladly accepted invitations to rest or eat from the members of the long, linear neighborhood that was slowly, hiker by hiker, getting acquainted with the new Appalachian Trail. The trail itself was the product of a dreamer, a man named Benton Mackay. He said he had been inspired during a 6-week hiking trip after graduating from Harvard, when he stood on Vermont's Stratton Mountain and imagined a ridge-top trail running through wilderness across the entire distance of the range. In 1921, when the idea had fermented, some friends convinced him to describe his vision in an article for the Journal of the American Institute of Architects. Mackay wrote that the purpose of the trail would be to extend the primeval environment and to set bounds to the metropolitan environment, providing a grand natural backbone accessible by those packed into cities along the eastern seaboard. After the article was published, Mackay led a concerted effort to involve hiking clubs, lawyers and others who might help bring this plan to fruition. Hundreds contributed, blazing and mapping sections, searching through property and tax records in county courthouses, angling to cobble together and preserve for the public the longest continuous walking path in the world. 10 years later, nearly half the trail had been marked, but mostly in the northeast, where many trails had long been established and hiking communities had a history. Myron Avery, a young lawyer and early visionary who took the reins, helped organise hiking clubs and plan undeveloped sections. Avery became chairman of the fledgling Appalachian Trail Conference in 1931, and by the group's meeting in 1937 in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, the trail was nearly finished. Avery knew even then, though, that the AT would never be completed. It would shift and bend and be subjected to endless rerouting and relocation, as if it had a life of its own. The timing of the completion was perfect, and it's quite possible the trail might not have existed if the plan had been delayed. At the beginning of the 20th century, the United States had just 100 miles of paved highways. But by the 1930s, cities had begun to spill outward, like a spreading blot, and roads that had been designed for horses and buggies were quickly becoming obsolete. Maybe those early AT volunteers felt the need for expediency as their country transformed quickly, as the population grew, as the American automobile industry sped forward at an unprecedented rate. The very same year of the Trail Conservancy meeting in Gatlinburg, in fact, the Federal Public Works Administration signed a check for more than $29 million, and the Federal Reconstruction Finance Corporation bought nearly $41 million in revenue bonds, and 10,000 men began working day and night to move 26 million tons of earth and stone and pour 4.3 million square yards of reinforced concrete to create 2 steady, even, parallel lanes that ran the length of Pennsylvania, including more than 114 new bridges, with acceleration lanes and paved shoulders bisecting the state east to west. Popular mechanics would call the Penn Turnpike America's first highway on which full performance of today's automobiles can be realized. The big road was born. It's ironic perhaps, but the new expressway's conceptual father was the same man who thought up the Appalachian Trail, Benton Mackay. A few years after his article on the primeval environment that stretched from north to south, Mackay, in an article in the New Republic, envisioned a highway completely free of horses, carriages, pedestrians, town, grade crossings, a highway built for the motorist and kept free from every encroachment, except the filling stations and restaurants necessary for his convenience. 2 years later, as the small army of trailblazers and pioneers worked to connect and maintain a footpath through a streak of American wilderness, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was already planning ways to absorb millions of soldiers, soon to engage fully in World War II, back into the nation's economy once the last bullet had been fired. And he saw a national system of highways that connected the country's major cities and spliced together rural agriculture centres as a possible solution. Planners immediately started charting a proposal to build or expand nearly 40,000 miles of road. By 1939, when Ford Motor Company's The Road of Tomorrow and General Motors' Highways and Horizons exhibits opened at the New York World's Fair, the American public was salivating over high-speed roadways. Since the beginning of civilization, transportation has been the key to man's progress, his prosperity, his happiness, said a narrator at the GM exhibit, which was said to feature the new and improved American city of 1960, with tangles of expressways lined with sleek cars and trucks. With the fast, safely designed highways of 1960, thrilling scenic feasts of great and beautiful country may now be explored. When Dwight D. Eisenhower took office in 1953, one of his first items of business was to see about building better highways. Our cities still conform too rigidly to the pattern, customs and practices of 50 years ago, he wrote. Each year we add hundreds of thousands of new automobiles to our vehicular population, but our road systems do not keep pace with the need. Eisenhower thought the American road system was decent, but had been designed based on terrain, existing Indian trails, cattle trails and arbitrary section lines, and that it has never been completely overhauled or planned to satisfy the needs of 10 years ahead. On Eisenhower's behalf, at a meeting in the Adirondacks of the governors of the 48 states, Vice President Richard Nixon despaired over the nearly 40,000 people killed and 1.3 million injured on roads annually, the billions of hours lost to traffic jams and detours, and the traffic-related civil suits clogging courts. Then he shocked the room. He called for a $50 billion federal highway program spread over 10 years. On October the 23rd of the same year, in Emma Gatewood's home state of Ohio, the first concrete was poured for a new $336 million cross-state turnpike. The state had acquired 5,600 parcels of land it needed for right-of-way and went to work building a highway divided by a 56-foot depressed median. It would feature paved shoulders, 15 well-lit traffic interchanges, 16 service plazas, toll booths and an ambulance service. You really will be able to see where you're going as the minimum sight distance is 900 feet, gushed the Columbus Dispatch. There are no steep hills because the maximum upgrade is 2% and the maximum downgrade 3.2%. You won't have to slow down from maximum speed limits, 65 miles an hour for cars and 55 for trucks. When you drive around curves, they're that gentle. 2 years later, the ribbons of road stretched from Pennsylvania in the east to Indiana in the west, over rivers and streams, across swampland and rolling hills. Joined with the Penn Turnpike, the road totaled 611 miles from Philadelphia to Indianapolis. So exciting was the new highway that the people of Ohio began to gather on overpasses to watch the speeding cars wend their way along the smooth pavement. The future of America had arrived, and it was riding on a 322 cubic inch V8 with an automatic transmission. By 1955, Americans owned 62 million vehicles. By June, when Emma Gatewood was a month into a hike, the auto industry was on pace for a banner year behind presidents such as Tex Colbert and Henry Ford II. Chevrolet had set a 6-month record registering 756,317 new cars. The national magazines were filled with colour pictures of the new 56 models, the Studebaker, the Chrysler, the Cadillac, the Buick Dynaflow with the sweep-ahead styling and the sizzle to match, which gets going from a standing start like a lark leaving the nest, with not a hint of hesitation between take-hold and take-off. Every car off the line in Detroit was bigger than the last. Fins grew and engines added horses. The number of two-car families was expected to jump by 3 million within 5 years, to a total of 7.5 million, which was attributed to the trend of suburban living. Some 16 million one-car wives remained marooned in the suburbs, but that would soon change. Advertisements for Old Crow bourbon and the Stetson Playboy were surrounded by those for Quaker State motor oil and B.F. Goodrich tyres. The rise of the car in the 1950s was accompanied by the rise of television. At the beginning of the decade, only 9% of American households had a TV set. More than half had one by 1954, and 86% would own one by the end of the decade. Americans began to experience life not by the soles of their feet, but by the seat of their pants. And along came a startling discovery. In March 1955, 2 months before Emma set out, a convention of family doctors assembled in Los Angeles to talk about a new generation of surprisingly lethargic children. 2 emissaries from the athletic world broke the news. American young people are forgetting how to walk. So said University of California football coach Lynn Pappy Waldorf and US Olympic trainer Eddie Wojcicki in the keynote address to the 7th Annual Assembly of the American Academy of General Practice. Children, the men testified, would rather jump into a car to go a block than walk. And shockingly, the trend had already produced conspicuous changes in the physiques of kids. The men both spoke of the sudden need to strengthen rather than loosen the muscles of athletes. They ascribed the change to a severe decrease in walking brought about by the habitual use of cars, and they pointed to a simultaneous decline in hiking. America, it seemed, was at a turning point. When given a choice, Americans preferred to grab the car keys. Streets and cities were being designed for the automobile rather than the pedestrian. This should have come as no surprise. Henry David Thoreau predicted as much 93 years before Emma's journey. In June 1862, when Atlantic Monthly published one of Thoreau's essays called Walking. At present, in this vicinity, the best part of the land is not private property. The landscape is not owned, and the walker enjoys comparative freedom. But possibly the day will come when it will be partitioned off into so-called pleasure grounds, in which a few will take a narrow and exclusive pleasure only, when fences shall be multiplied and man-traps and other engines invented to confine men to the public road, and walking over the surface of God's earth shall be construed to mean trespassing on some gentleman's grounds. To enjoy a thing exclusively is commonly to exclude yourself from the true enjoyment of it. Let us improve our opportunities then before the evil days are upon us. Anthropologists estimate that early man walked 20 miles a day. Mental and physical benefits have been attributed to walking as far back as ancient times. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder, 23 to 79 AD, described walking as one of the medicines of the will. Hippocrates, the Greek physician, called walking man's best medicine and prescribed walks to treat emotional problems, hallucinations, and digestive disorders. Aristotle lectured while strolling. Through the centuries, the best thinkers, writers, and poets have preached the virtues of walking. Leonardo da Vinci designed elevated streets to protect walkers from cart traffic. Johann Sebastian Bach once walked 200 miles to hear a master play the organ. William Wordsworth was said to have walked 180,000 miles in his lifetime. Charles Dickens captured the ecstasy of near madness and insomnia in the essay Night Walks, and once said, "The sum of the whole is this: walk and be happy, walk and be healthy." Robert Louis Stevenson wrote of the great fellowship of the open road, and the brief but priceless meetings which only trampers know. Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche said, "Only those thoughts that come by walking have any value." More recently, writers who knew the benefits of striking out excoriated the apathetic public over and over again for its laziness. "Of course, people still walk," wrote a journalist in Saturday Night magazine in 1912. "That is, they shuffle along on their own pins from the door to the streetcar or taxicab, but real walking is as extinct as the dodo." "They say they haven't time to walk, but wait 15 minutes for a bus to carry them an eighth of a mile," wrote Edmund Lester Pearson in 1925. "They pretend that they are rushed, very busy, very energetic. The fact is they are lazy. A few quaint persons, boys chiefly, ride bicycles." But to dyed-in-the-wool walk lovers, the car has proved a calamity, because unless we be strong as steel, our lazy and baser natures yield to the temptation of time-saving when a ride is offered us, wrote Mary McGuinness in 1931. Thoreau's evil days had arrived, and the country, keys in hand, was making a dramatic move from feet to tyres. The resulting death toll was astounding. By 1934, as the road-building programs gained steam, it was expected that 2,000 pedestrians would be killed and 8,000 more injured. 15 years later, those numbers had skyrocketed. Cars were killing nearly 30 people a day and injuring 700. A journalist for the Saturday Evening Post called it a feud between man and automobile. The pedestrian, he wrote, literally would be safer on a lion-infested African veldt or in man-eating tiger territory than he is crossing a downtown street at dusk. And at that moment, among the confluence of mechanical engineering and highway building, the Appalachian Trail, the People's Path, was fully blazed and open to the public. You could set out for a day or a week or a month and lose yourself in the wilderness. A man named Harold Allen summarised its appeal. Remote for detachment, narrow for chosen company, winding for leisure, lonely for contemplation, the trail leads not merely north and south, but upward to the body, mind and soul of man. In 1948, Earl V. Schaefer became the first person to hike its entirety in a single trip, the first through hiker, and when he was finished he wrote, "Already it seemed like a vivid dream, through sunshine, shadow and rain. Already I knew that many times I would want to be back again. On the cloud-high hills where the whole world lies below and far away, by the wind-worn cairn where admiring eyes verse welcome newborn day, to walk once more where the white clouds sail, far from the city clutter, and drink a toast to the long high trail in clear, cold mountain water." She came down out of Carver's Gap near Tennessee's Roan Mountain on June the 4th, and she was having no luck finding a place to stay. It seemed the bigger the house, the less likely she would be welcome. One woman was terribly snooty and acted as though she was insulted that Emma had even come to her door. Tired of searching for charity, she checked into a motel on the highway. She washed her hair and some clothes, took a welcome shower and got a good night's sleep on a soft bed. The next day's hike was nearly all on paved road and she grew tired quickly. When she could go no further, she stopped at a little house to ask if she could rest a while on the porch. The man who answered thought she was a government agent who had come to spy on them. He stayed inside with the door latched and asked her all sorts of crazy questions through the screen. She tried to explain who she was and what she was doing, but the man was still suspicious. He asked her if she was with the FBI. When she realised she was making no progress, she stepped off the porch and walked on, and finally found a family with 7 sons, all at home, who let her stay the night. She left at 5:45 the next morning and followed the trail up an Appalachian gorge, carved out by the swift waters of Laurel Fork. At the end of the gorge, past eastern hemlocks and sycamore trees, she found a majestic waterfall, the most beautiful she had ever seen, cascading over moss-covered stone. She pressed on toward Hampton, Tennessee, but she'd run out of water by the time she reached Watauga Dam, the second tallest of all the Tennessee Valley Authority dams. She asked a man there, standing in front of the 6,400-acre lake, for drinking water, but he said there was none around. Emma didn't seem to mind, though. A very nice-looking man he was too, she wrote in her notebook when she stopped to drink from a spring. She slept that night atop the mountain, and the wild dogs came back, so she built a fire for protection. She stayed awake most of the night, worrying about whether it would rain. On June the 8th, a storm moved over the mountains and brought with it rain and sleet and intense cold. Emma put on most of the clothes she had, including 3 coats, and walked as quickly as she could, but she couldn't get warm. The trail was lousy with nettles and brush, and the hike was miserable. But she finally crossed the state line into Virginia and into the little town of Damascus. It was a place that would become known as Trail Town, USA, in part due to its kindness to AT hikers. But on that day, when she needed shelter most, she was turned away from a motel. Soaked as she was, they wouldn't keep her. She walked 3 more blocks and found a cabin for rent, and it was fine. She had privacy anyway, and she wouldn't be a bother to anyone. She washed some of her clothes, and that night, celebrating the fact that she crossed another state line, her 3rd so far, she sat down and treated herself to a delicious supper of steak.